This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. It is Thursday, April 2nd. Hope you had a good April Fool's Day. I know from the looks of it, not a lot of people, participated in April Fool's Day, which, they read the room and they noticed that it's probably not the best time to be fooling people, So, I'm not going to fool you. I don't know if Chris fooled you yesterday, but I'm not going to fool you here today. This is going to be sports, and by that I mean we're going to be talking about not sports. Just a lot of speculation on today's show. So today we're talking about best potential playoff showdowns if the NBA does come back. Then we go into NBA free agent predictions. Then we go into a good question of whether National Signing Day for college football should be pushed back. Then topic 5, we'll talk about MLB trying to keep notes from the Red Sox and Astros investigations out of court, which is very interesting because why would they want to do that? We'll read into that a little bit later. And then, of course, we'll end it all off with movies 89 through 80 in our top hundreds in the Athletics top 100 sports movies of all time. We'll keep chugging through that list. First, this is breaking news. This happened literally 15 minutes before I started recording, and it's a doozy. This is one of the biggest sporting events in the world, year-round. I mean, not year-round, but yearly. Annually is one of the biggest sports events in the world, and I am, of course, talking about the Wimbledon tennis tournament, the Wimbledon championships that are held in England. So they just announced, I'm recording this at 11:57 currently on Wednesday, and this came out at 11:05, so the 15-minute was a little lie. But the Wimbledon championships have been canceled due to coronavirus pandemic. The All England Club confirmed in a statement Wednesday. It is the first time Wimbledon has been canceled since World War II in 1945. It is also the first time since the tournament began in 1877 that the event will not be played during peacetime. So obviously peacetime means there's no wars going on, which England, I don't think obviously they don't have any wars going on. They're in peacetime. But because of the coronavirus pandemic, everybody's got to change their tune on literally everything. So Wimbledon is now being canceled. And I understand it's one of the biggest tennis. It's the biggest, or it's the biggest grass court championship in tennis. I understand that part. I know that's Roger Federer's playground pretty much. But Wimbledon had been scheduled to be played between June 29th and July 12th. So that's still pretty far off. Still a couple months away. But they decided to cancel it ahead of time. Here, in addition, the ATP and the WTA made a joint announcement that all events at all levels of both professional tours have been canceled through July 13th, covering the entire grass court season. The same decision was made by the International Tennis Federation. Though the All England Club considered a number of alternatives, including postponement, it decided that cancellation was, in fact, the best option. It is with great regret that the main board of the All England Club and the Committee of Management of the Championships have today decided that the Championships 2020 will be canceled due to public health concerns linked to the coronavirus epidemic, Wimbledon said in a statement on its website. Uppermost in our mind has been the health and safety of all those who come together to make Wimbledon happen. the public in the UK and visitors from around the world, our players, guests, members, staff, volunteers, partners, contractors, and local residents, as well as our broader responsibility to society's efforts to tackle this global challenge to our way of life. So, this makes a lot of sense. It's kind of the same vein as the Masters. The Masters got canceled because the Masters are an international event. It's kind of, right now, even national events are being canceled, as you can see from the NCAA, from NFL, NBA, and stuff like that. But these international events were pretty much the first ones that were going to be on the chopping block. We were talking about the Olympics getting canceled back in February. We were talking about the Masters being postponed because the Masters was the most recent international event. So that needed to be postponed as soon as possible, pretty much, and they pretty much did that. They accomplished that. But next year's event will be held June 28th to July 11th. Hopefully everything will be back to normal by then. We really don't know, but hopefully everything's back to normal by then. Wimbledon was canceled from 1915 to 1918 because of World War I, and from 1940 to 1945 due to World War II. While moving Wimbledon into late July or August this year was discussed, not enough sunlight and too much dew at that time of year made any move problematic. Playing the tournament behind closed doors with no spectators was ruled out by the club in a statement last week. With the likelihood that the government's measures will continue for many months, it is our view that we must act responsibly to protect the large numbers of people required to prepare the championships from being at risk, from the training of ball boys and girls to thousands of officials, line judges, stewards, players, suppliers, media, and contractors who convene on the AELTC grounds, and equally to consider that the people, supplies, and services legally required to stage the championships would not be available at any point this summer, thus ruling out postponement. The All England Club said in Wednesday's statement. Sources told ESPN that the All England Club is insured against cancellation. Wednesday's decision came a few hours after it was announced that 563 people, the highest one-day figure so far, had died from the virus in England from 9 a.m. Tuesday to 9 a.m. Wednesday, taking the death toll in England to 2,352. Britain is under severe restrictions due to the virus. People have been told to stay home, work from home, only leave your house for necessities such as food, go out only once per day for exercise. So, of course, the French Open, which was scheduled to be played earlier than Wimbledon, is scheduled to be played May 24th to June 7th. They announced last month that the event will now be played September 20th to October 4th, which that might be in danger as well. The United States Tennis Association on Wednesday issued a statement saying the U.S. Open is still scheduled to begin August 24th. At the Billie Jean King National Tennis Center in Flushing Meadows, New York, which New York, of course, is kind of the epicenter of the virus in the United States, so I'm not really sure if that's still going to be able to happen. I know August is still very far away, but, it's seeming less and less likely as we go on. The site will begin to be converted into a medical facility starting Tuesday. It will be used for 350 temporary hospital beds and prepare food packages during the coronavirus pandemic. And then the USTA sent out this statement saying the USTA is carefully monitoring the rapidly changing environment surrounding the COVID-19 pandemic and is preparing for all contingencies. The USTA said in its statement, we also rely on the USTA's medical advisory group as well as the governmental and security officials to ensure that we have the broadest understanding of this fluid situation. So there you have it. The tennis world is getting hit with this as well. It seems like the only sport that can really survive right now is kind of golf, but even golf is canceling all their events, as we talked about the Masters. I know there was a lot of buzz around the Valero being open, the Valero Open happening, but I think a lot of golfers backed out if it did happen. Wimbledon is easily one of the biggest events in tennis. Easily the biggest event in tennis. And now it is canceled. The French Open got postponed. French Open probably will get canceled in a little bit here if things don't start getting better. And I know I don't think France hasn't been hit as bad as everyone else in Europe, but they are right next to Italy and England. I know they have the channel right there to kind of block them, but I mean, just another one bites the dust here for the coronavirus pandemic. So unfortunate. I'm not much of a tennis watcher, but I do watch Wimbledon. I do watch the U.S. Open. I watch the Australian Open if I'm up during the times that they play. But so this is very disappointing. As a casual tennis watcher, it's very disappointing. As a general sports fan, it's very disappointing. But it's just what we got to do. So when we return, we'll talk about the best possible best potential playoff showdowns if the NBA does come back and plays the playoffs. When we return.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
So, of course, it's tough to know when basketball comes back. We talked about it multiple times. We talked about different scenarios. We talked about postponing it until October, starting the season back up in October, play like 10 games, and then go straight into the playoffs, and then, starting in August, finishing in October, then starting the next season in around Christmas time. We talked about that. We talked about just going straight into the playoffs, which is a little unfair for the teams that are kind of on the bubble there. But it's time for speculation. It's time to look through what would be the best playoff showdowns that could potentially happen if the NFL does. The NBA does come back, which is a big if. I know the NBA is kind of all over the news right now because they're the first to cancel their season or suspend their season. They're the first to do that. They're also the most popular league that is playing at this time. I mean, baseball, they postponed their opening day, so they're kind of in the same boat. But that's just the beginning of the season. The NBA was legit through the end of the year. Now, same thing with hockey, but people, let's be honest, people don't care about hockey as much. So let's look into first round showdowns. Now, of course, the big one, we were talking about this one before all of this happened. We've been talking about this one since early February when Zion Williamson came back and finally played some NBA games. So I'm of course talking about, would it be the Los Angeles Lakers versus the Memphis Grizzlies and Ja Morant, or would it be the Lakers versus New Orleans and Zion Williamson? Those are the interesting questions. That was the huge playoff race we were looking forward to with the last 20 games left in the season. We were looking forward to Ja Morant and the Memphis Grizzlies versus Zion Williamson and the New Orleans Pelicans. See which team could make that push to the playoffs. Now, there are other candidates for the 8th seed, of course. Memphis Grizzlies held a 3.5 game lead on New Orleans, Portland, and Sacramento. San Antonio is 4 games back as well. But for the sake of this exercise, we're going to keep it to the new hyped cores, which is Ja Morant and Zion Williamson, which is very unfair to the Blazers and Kings and stuff like that. But sorry, you don't have Zion Williamson. So it really depends on which storyline you like more. Do you like Ja Morant and the Grizzlies being one of the best stories in NBA season, where they were expected to be one of the worst teams in the league, and somehow they sneak into the playoffs, they make the playoffs, they had a fantastic first half of the year, their second half of the year has kind of been bleh, but they have an extremely young core with a rookie NBA head coach? Or do you care about the Zion Williamson versus LeBron James matchup that everyone has been dreaming of, especially in the playoffs? He had pretty historic production. He's another rookie with a massive impact, doing so on a team that needed that force to put it over the top. The Pelicans already were in the mix in the West, even though they started 6-22 to start the season. They righted the ship. They were on a pretty good streak before Zion joined, and then Zion joined, and that kind of pushed them a little further. They did play the Lakers twice during this time, and they lost. They got swept by the Lakers all 4 times, actually. But even winning one game against, you of course also have the Anthony Davis versus New Orleans storyline. You got Lonzo, Brandon Ingram. You got all those guys facing the Lakers one more time. There's more storylines with the New Orleans Pelicans versus the Los Angeles Lakers. Next up, Boston Celtics against the 76ers. It would be a 3-6 matchup in the East. It would be the Celtics versus the 76ers, like I said. The matchup that Joel Embiid refused to call a rivalry for a couple years because the Celtics seem to have his number on the court. With Aaron Baines and Al Horford, the Celtics could stifle Embiid and dare anybody else to beat them. Nobody seemed ready for the task. Then Embiid started garnering a little bit of success against Boston before Baines was traded to Phoenix and Horford signed with Philadelphia. Sounds like the Sixers should be good to dominate this series, but we're not really sure. In the preseason, the Sixers would have been one of the top 2 teams in the East. People were predicting them to make the finals. But they've kind of had a lot of identity crises throughout the whole season for various different reasons. So it's going to be interesting it would be interesting to see those 2 teams battle it out. You got the Al Horford going from the Celtics to the 76ers. Then, of course, you have Joel Embiid. So next up, Jokic tries to take down James Harden. It would be a 3-6 matchup in the West, which would be the Nuggets versus the Houston Rockets. The Houston Rockets, of course, going with their ultra small ball, the Pocket Rockets. As I heard that nickname once, and I'm in love with it now. So you got the Pocket Rockets versus the Denver Nuggets. But the big rivalry here, or the big matchup right here, would be Jokic and James Harden, who have wildly different styles of play. Aside from being both being expert floppers. I mean, this is a compliment. Harden is the guy the Rockets want to shoot all the time. His usage has been historic over the last few years, and his eye-popping offensive numbers have vaulted him into a discussion of one of the most dangerous offensive weapons we've ever seen. He moves the ball a lot, but not as much as he did during his first season under Mike D'Antoni. Jokic, on the other hand, needs to be told to shoot more often. The offense run through both stars, but Jokic is often looking to pass far more than he's looking to score. So the Rockets going full-time small ball, containing Jokic will be extremely difficult, even if PJ Tucker can somehow outmuscle him out of the paint. Nobody on that team will be able to contest his shot unless they're blitzing him to help, and his passing acumen can then carve you up. Plus, he'll have vision lanes with no height to block his view. Of course, finding someone to truly slow down Harden on the other end will be nearly impossible for the Nuggets, but as we've seen with the Rockets before, all it takes is just a couple missed 3-pointers, and then you kind of can take advantage of the Rockets there. Next up, we're still in the first round, by the way. We might have to make this a segment might have to make this a future segment, because we got two more interesting matchups in the first round, and then we can move on to the second round. I might move that second round to Sunday, just because stuff to talk about. So, Kawhi Leonard, Paul George get to welcome Luka Doncic to the NBA playoffs. That will be the next one. Luka Doncic will get tested by the wily veterans. This is kind of trial by fire you want to see a young player go through. Luka Doncic is an unbelievable phenom who has far surpassed anything that could have been expected of him 2 years into his NBA career. We know he's been tested at the highest levels outside of the NBA in pressure-packed situations. He's been the man in the second best league in the world, so I'm not sure he'll be rattled by the stage. But having to do so against Kawhi Leonard or Paul George or Patrick Beverley is completely different. Doesn't mean he can't do it, but it's going to be a huge challenge for him in the first round of his first ever NBA playoff action. The Clippers, as a whole, have the potential to play an asphyxiating offense with championship ambitions. Anything less than a title parade, let alone a finals appearance, will be viewed as a disappointment and a failure for the Los Angeles Clippers here, as they've kind of built up this I wouldn't say perfect team, but kind of one of the best teams in the league, obviously. That defense will be tested by the most efficient offense in NBA history during the first round matchup. And the job Rick Carlisle has done with his offense and his bench is masterful. Does that offense hold up in the playoffs? And how much can the Clippers stifle it, if at all? It could end up being a quick first round series, but it would be a lot of fun with good story angles attached for some fantastic basketball. And that's one of my least favorite things about this whole thing. I was starting to watch Dallas Mavericks games a lot more, and I was figuring out the majesty that is Luka Doncic. Now, I watched him live last year. One game last year, they played the New Orleans Pelicans last year, and I watched him in that one, and I was like, holy cow, this guy's really good. But, oh well. Next up, Utah Jazz versus the Oklahoma City Thunder. This is the last matchup we'll talk about here in the first round. There's a lot going on here. First and foremost, these franchises have history of recent playoffs together. 2 years ago, Westbrook proclaimed he was going to shut that down. Can't say that. I'm not going to say that on the podcast. When it came to the Utah Jazz point guard Ricky Rubio, the OKC Thunder lost 2 of the next 3 games and were eliminated after that comment. But that was also a very unbalanced level of production and responsibilities for that Thunder team. Russ is gone, Paul George is gone, and Billy Donovan is finally allowed to coach the team in a way that isn't just placating to stars. They're in the honeymoon phase with Chris Paul. They have one of the deadliest lineups in the NFL when they throw CP3 out there with 2 other lead guards, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Dennis Schroeder. This Thunder team has been one of the best surprises all season. Nobody expected them to be this good, especially after they lost Russell Westbrook and all that. On the Jazz side, it's a lot more drama. You got Rudy Gobert, and then Donovan Mitchell. They're going to be back in the locker room together after this whole COVID-19 fallout. Gobert was the first player to test positive, of course, and Mitchell tested positive soon after as well. Gobert was reckless when he acted prior to the positive testing, blah, blah, blah. So there's a little drama in the Utah Jazz locker room. So like I said, we'll discuss the second round showdowns on Sunday. We're going to keep this rolling until we get through this whole thing. So next up, we'll talk about NBA free agent predictions when we return.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
So let's continue with the NBA speculation talk as we move on to free agency. Regardless of when or if we restart and complete the season, everybody's favorite NBA topic will lurk around the corner, which is free agency. And this is a fact. This is a fact. One of my favorite things about the NBA. Now, I'm getting more into the actual games of the NBA, but 2 of my favorite things about the NBA were the playoffs, because the playoffs were always very interesting. And then, of course, free agency, because it seems like NBA free agency has always been insane. And you see other leagues trying to copy it. You saw the NFL, their free agency was quite crazy 2 weeks ago. And then you saw MLB have a pretty crazy offseason on their own, although it's one they didn't really want to have. But, I mean, they had a crazy offseason on their own. So the majority of the season is in the books. Lottery teams in particular may only have a few games left, if that. As a result, most of the evaluation work is already done, and we can use the current hiatus to start looking ahead to the offseason. First things first, there's something that needs to happen before free agency, which this is overlooked. Of course, free agents need to be freed. For most players, that is a straightforward process. The contract expired, and in all but a rare few cases, they fail to sign an extension before July 1st, or whatever date the league is going to change it to. For others, however, it's a bit more complicated than that. 41 players have options on their contracts that could result in either free agency or another year playing on their current contract. Virtually all those contracts require the decision, whether by the team or the players, to be made sometime mid to late June, or whenever the NBA lets them make that decision. So, as of today, we're going to look at 41 decisions. Of those, 12 are team options, meaning the team can choose whether to keep the player another year. The other 29 held by the players, meaning it's up to them. Some contracts with non-guaranteed seasons are erroneously reported as team options. The vast majority of those belong to tertiary players, and I won't be dealing with them in here. So, let's start out with the team options. We have Bobby Portis, New York Knicks. He's currently, if he gets picked up, he will be owed $15 million. Knicks may be dumb, but they're not stupid. Maybe. Anyway, not even the Knicks would pick up this option. Portis offers some scoring and forward spacing from both front court spots, but struggles to defend either of them and would be lucky to get a third of this amount in free agency. So the verdict on that one would be no, they would not pick him up. Next up, we got Frank Kaminsky for the Phoenix Suns. He would be owed $5 million if he gets picked up. Frank the Tank gave the Suns some decent minutes this year. Despite a weird penchant for missing point-blank layups, and his salary isn't outlandish, the wild card here, however, is that the Suns can generate significant cap room by declining his option, depending on where their first-round pick lands and how much the cap number is affected by the current hiatus. The Phoenix is looking at $20 million or more in room by declining this option, so verdict is probably going to be no here. Garrett Temple, we talked about him. He's the vice president of the NBPA. He would be owed $5 million as well. Is Joe Tsai cool with paying millions in luxury tax? Temple's option is likely the best weather vane on that question. A useful 3-and-D backup too, who doesn't need the ball and a well-regarded locker room guy. Temple will have suitors around this price point if Brooklyn sets him free. Nets have limited alternatives. The high ambitions for next season with Irving, with Durant all coming back, they'll probably be hanging on to him for another year. Chick Diallo, Phoenix Suns, he would be owed just under $2 million. Didn't get much of a run this year. He's a rotation caliber player, more than worth the plunge at this price. However, as with Kaminsky above, the Suns' salary cap situation dictates that they might prefer to decline the option. In this case, the Suns could decline it and bring him back on a minimum at the exact same number after using their cap space. Abel Nader, Oklahoma City, he would be owed just under $2 million as well. Among the Thunder's endless stable of moderately athletic and phenomenally unskilled young wings, Nader provided the most convincing impersonation of a real basketball player last season. The Thunder are no longer tap dancing around the luxury tax, which should make this number an easier one to swallow. Nader's deal isn't fully guaranteed until July 15th, or whenever the league decides to equivalate that. But presumably, if the Thunder pick up the option, they're picking up the guaranteed as well. So let's move on to player options real quick, which these are going to be the bigger names, of course. The team options were more people, you may have heard of them, but I didn't hear most of them. That's why I kind of skipped around there. So, player options. So a no verdict on the player option means he becomes a free agent. A yes verdict means he picks up the option and stays. So the last couple guys, we were talking about whether the team should pick up the option. Now we're talking about whether the player should stay with the team. So let's get with it. Mike Conley, Utah, he would be owed $35 million if he picks it up. Conley's option is technically an early termination option, not a player option, only one this summer. Functionally, it's the same thing between Conley's scoring dip in Utah this season and likely frigid summer market for veterans of any stripe. There seems virtually no chance that he passes up a number this large for uncertainty in free agency, so that's a yes. Gordon Hayward, Boston, who'd be owed just under $35 million. Hayward's strong bounce-back season with the Celtics this year theoretically opens the door for him to test free agency in search of one more big payday. Realistically, however, one of the teams that have room would seem to need to break the bank to have a 30-year-old wing be their third-best player. Hayward is clearly better off banking on $34 million this year and then trying again in a much more favorable free agent market in 2021. So that's a yes. Andre Drummond, Cleveland Cavaliers, he would be owed about $29 million here. The noises about Drummond opting out and become free agent are just that, noise. There's no chance he's getting anywhere close to $28 million in unrestricted free agency, especially in this summer's market with a few room teams. Moreover, the likely decline in the cap number probably eliminated what little possibility existed of a Drummond opt-out. Once Drummond opts in, the more interesting scenario is whether the Cavaliers try to sign him to an extension beyond the season. So that's more likely a yes. Then we move on to one of the bigger, possibly the biggest name. You got Anthony Davis. He has a player option here. He is owed $28 million if he takes it. Depending on what happens with the cap number, there are scenarios where it would make more sense for Davis to opt into this season and then re-sign with the Lakers as an unrestricted free agent a year from now. In particular, a big dip in the cap this year with no smoothing would yield a huge cap jump a year from now. If the dip is large enough, Davis's max might not even hit the $28.5 million he's currently owed. Under the present assumptions about the cap, however, he's better off opting out right now and signing a multi-year deal, most likely a 3-year deal with an opt-out in 2022, when he qualifies as a 10-year vet and can get 35% of that year's cap as a first-year salary. He is not Supermax eligible, so Supermax is not an option for him there. DeMar DeRozan, San Antonio, he's owed about $27 million. 4-time All-Star who can still score at a high level. DeRozan is in a position where the interest in him seems remarkably muted. There's not really much interest in him. That's partly because he's a tough piece to fit in a team-wide puzzle. Only made 15 threes over the past 2 years, and the on-court versus off-court data has been unkind throughout his career. With a limited free agent market and mostly rebuilding teams doing the bidding, DeRozan finds himself in a similar boat with Hayward. His best bet is to land his payday next summer. Verdict? Probably, yes. Then we move on to Tim Hardaway Jr., Dallas. He's owed $19 million. Hardaway and Evan Fournier are birds of a feather. Both 27 years old. Evan Fournier, by the way, is next. He's for Orlando, and he's owed $17 million plus $1.6 million in incentives. Both had career years. Both face a difficult option decision because they're already well compensated. Hardaway could opt out, but the more you look at it, the more you think the advantages are in favor of him staying put are greater. For starters, he gets to hit fungos on a perimeter while playing with a genius-level pick-and-roll operator. Dude, don't screw this up. Another year of hitting 40.7% from 3 and playing shockingly serviceable defense could lead to Hardaway becoming a prize commodity in a frothy 2021 market. There's always the possibility of an extension, but Dallas's scales likely tip toward waiting a year as well. The Mavs potentially have cap space in 2020, 2021, and will be their last real shot at it before Luka Doncic signs a Rose Rule extension. So he's probably going to stay, yeah. Kelly Olynyk, which I didn't even freaking know he was still in the league, but this will be the last one we do here. Olynyk has his share of fans around the league, but more as a third big on a good team than a centerpiece. Thus, it's hard to see how he gets anything close to $12 million in free agency. He would be owed $12 million, plus up to $1.4 million in incentives. None of the teams with cap room would appear to be in the market for a veteran center at that price. Even if they were, it's highly questionable whether Olynyk would be their first choice. So yeah, he'll probably take that option. And that's pretty much it for team and player options. When we return, we'll talk about National Signing Day. Should it be pushed back? What should we do with National Signing Day when we return?
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
So if you follow recruiting at all, which I don't really follow recruiting, to be honest with you. I love college football. I love college athletics in general, but recruiting is just a hard sell for me. Recruiting is very difficult for me to follow just because, I mean, it's all about the future. And when you have, if you have a bad team, it's kind of like in the NFL or the NBA or the MLB or whatever, and your team's not good. So all you have to do look forward to is the draft. That's pretty much what recruiting is. Except it's every year. It's all year round, actually. You have recruits coming to games. You got recruiting trips throughout the spring, throughout the summer. You have dead periods that are like 2 weeks long or something like that, so coaches don't burn themselves out or whatever. Recruiting is very strenuous. It's very hard to keep up with. And it just doesn't very interest me that much because you're putting a lot of attention on these high school kids, and I know we put a lot of attention on these college-age kids, but at least they know what they're getting into. The high school-age kids, they don't really know what they're getting into when all they know is that they're good at football, and then all of a sudden they have national media attention out of nowhere. For instance, like Zion Williamson, do you think he expected to have that many spectators in high school when he was playing for a small Catholic school in Spartanburg, South Carolina? No, I don't think so. But we know that the games are played from August to early January, but college football season never ends. It really doesn't. Recruiting never ends. Competition manifests itself every day between the coaches when it comes to recruiting, where programs are doing everything to beat their competitors to set themselves up for future success. That is why every week you won't want to miss this week in recruiting, which I'm not going to do. But should the NCAA consider moving signing day? So we are currently in a dead period right now. The NCAA made a correct decision here since all spring sports are canceled, since no football teams are practicing. They usually are doing their spring practice right now. We are now in a dead period for recruiting, which means teams cannot reach out to recruits, cannot recruit them. So we are in a dead period right now because of the coronavirus, which may get extended, may not, but it's going to be interesting to see how that affects National Signing Day, how that affects football season, especially if they canceled football season and then all the seniors get one more year if they so choose. So the NCAA added an early football signing period in December. It didn't intend for National Signing Day to basically get moved up a few months, but with players permitted to sign in December, most schools in the past 2 cycles have signed the vast majority of the recruiting classes long before the traditional February signing date. So I think they should just get rid of the February signing date at this point, but whatever. Everything with recruiting is sped up now. Coaches are offering prospects earlier. Official visits are happening earlier. Commitments are happening earlier. That's the new world of college football recruiting. But this year, a sped up calendar may not be what's best for the prospects because of the COVID-19 pandemic. There are no visits of any kind now. Though coaches and prospects can visit electronically. Okay, I'm sorry. So we're not in a complete dead period. Should the NCAA consider changing some of the dates, either by eliminating the early signing period or pushing back the February signing date? Ohio State's Ryan Day is one coach with an opinion on that. He said, I think there definitely should be some reform in different areas. I don't think it should be drastic, but I do think that based on when we're able to get people back on campus to visit, that we should be able to change a few things. We have lost a lot of time. February's dead. March is now dead. April up until the 15th is dead. I think if we can get visits up and going in May and June, I think we're okay. But if it keeps getting pushed back, I think there should be a little bit of reform in terms of opening some things up more for visits in the summer. I don't think you should have the whole summer, but I think guys need to come visit, see what campus is all about in recruiting. I would say we definitely need to look at all of those things. So it's hard to map out what's going to happen to the recruiting calendar because nobody knows when life will return to normal. But given that there's a chance that people will be quarantining into summer months, that drastically cuts down on the time for prospects to visit schools and come to an informed decision. More time is advantageous for everyone, especially teams going through their recruitments. Maybe it makes sense to keep the December signing period, let the prospects who have made up their minds sign. But depending on how long visits are shut down and how much longer coaches are prohibited from going on the road, we may end up seeing the February signing day pushed back a bit. So it's very interesting. I think it makes a lot of sense to push it back. Because a lot of recruiting, there's a lot of things that happen in recruiting, especially at the last second. Now, whether it be legal or not is a completely different scenario. But there's a lot of things that happen in recruiting where one team just kind of swoops in, steals a guy from another team, and that player falls in love with everything that school has to offer. I agree with Ryan Day. School visits, campus visits are very important. You're going to spend your next 3 or 4 years, you're going to spend some of the most formidable years of your entire life at this place. You want to make sure it's the right fit for you. Now, of course, some players don't care about that. They just care about playing they just care about playing football and playing for the best team and stuff like that. But some players legit care a lot about the culture. Like I mentioned this before, culture is a huge thing in college football. Football in general, actually. You are not going to win football games now without having a good culture. You could argue that you never could win good football. You can never win football games without a good culture. But I mean, if you look at the U back in the 80s, would you consider that a good culture? It was a winning culture. You can say that. But overall, I wouldn't say Miami of the 80s was a good culture. I wouldn't say SMU in the 80s was a good culture, but they won football games. They had a winning culture. They had a bad culture. So culture is more important in football nowadays, and the only way to sell culture is to get kids on campus to see the culture of the campus, of the football team, of the football staff, and all that. So campus visits are super important for recruiting. And if these kids that are 17, 18 years old, they're about to make the biggest decision of their life. This decision could change their entire life. But they can't go see where they could be spending the next 3 or 4 years of their life. They can't go see how things are actually ran at these. Because, I mean, coaches could say whatever they want. But if you don't go see a practice or go see a game and see how the coach actually acts during practice or during games, then how are you going to know if that's the right fit for you? So I think pushing back National Signing Day would be a great idea. NCAA, they're having a good streak right now. They gave eligibility back to spring sport athletes, so they're on a good streak right now. I mean, they're fully capable of throwing that all out and not having a good streak anymore. But I think moving National Signing Day back, or even just keeping the early signing day period, I don't think that really matters at this point. I don't think early signing day really matters. I mean, I agree with Ryan Day. I mean, you can keep it. I agree with this article. You can keep it for the kids who are fully made up on their minds. They made campus visits and stuff like that. They're made up. You can keep it for them, and so they can get on campus early or whatever. Or you can just cut that out, move regular signing day back, maybe to like May or something, like the end of high school. Give them time to visit campuses and stuff like that. I mean, that's very important. I can't stress that enough. It is very important to get to see where you're going to be spending the next couple of years of your life. That's why college tours are so important, especially for high school students. That's why college tours are important. That's why meeting up with people that are going to the college with you is very important. Kind of making those connections very early is very important, because you want to see what kind of culture that college has and what kind of and what all you can get there. So yeah, I agree that we should push it back. I think it'll benefit the players. It will benefit colleges, especially the ones that kind of swoop in and kind of swoon recruits towards the end there. I think it benefits those guys, and I think it benefits pretty much everybody. The only people it doesn't benefit are people that want news, like me. I don't know. It doesn't benefit me that much. But, I mean, there's still people committing. There's still people committing to teams right now. But I do think it should be pushed back. I think it's probably the best thing that you could could do at this moment in time, especially since we don't know if we're going to be able to do those summer visits. We don't know if we're going to be able to have a football season in general, which, once again, I think it's still too early to make a say on that, but enough people have been talking about it where it is in your mind now. And I've helped with that. I'm sorry, I put that in your mind as well, but I mean, it's in my mind, so I'm going to keep bringing it up because it is a huge possibility that could happen. So when we return, we'll talk about the MLB. This is an interesting thing. The MLB, they're trying to keep their notes out of the courts. I'll explain more when we come back.
Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
You know, the more I think about it, the more I think that this is possibly the best thing that could ever happen to the Astros, the Houston Astros, or the Boston Red Sox. This whole COVID-19, the coronavirus pandemic. I mean, I understand that there's not a lot of positives out of this, but if you're a Astros player, Astros fan, whatever, this is kind of a good distraction because, I mean, I haven't talked about, I talked about the Red Sox investigation a little bit, like 2 weeks ago, but I haven't really talked about the sign stealing scandal in so long, and I was expecting to talk about it nonstop, especially once baseball started and these Houston Astros players started getting hit all the time and stuff like that. I mean, I was fully expecting to just talk about this nonstop, but then the coronavirus hit, and then baseball moved their opening day back, which they're probably going to postpone it again, but because opening day was supposed to be last week. And they said they're going to push it back 2 weeks. They're more than likely going to push it back a little bit more than that. But because of all this, we haven't really talked about the sign-stealing scandal at all, which is kind of, I mean, and when baseball comes back, will we talk about the sign-stealing scandal at all? That's a huge question. Will we even mention that the Astros pretty much stole a World Series, cheated to win a World Series? Will we even mention that the Red Sox are being investigated for basically the same thing? But I saw an interesting article yesterday. The title of it is, MLB is trying to keep notes from Astros Red Sox investigations out of court. And I thought it was interesting. So here we go. Major League Baseball doesn't think its notes from the Astros Red Sox sign stealing investigations are relevant to a lawsuit brought by daily fantasy sports contestants. The suit alleges that sign stealing corrupted daily fantasy games and that those involved should be held responsible. The Red Sox and the Astros are defendants in the case, along with Major League Baseball. Brian Seeley, he's the MLB's lead investigator, argued in a court filing Monday that if the league must reveal greater detail from its interviews and findings, future investigations could be jeopardized. Lawyers for MLB also cited attorney-client privilege and other legal grounds in their objections. If the players, club officials, or the MLBPA suspected that conversations with our attorneys or investigators about potential rules violations could be revealed, it would be significantly hamper the commissioner's ability to exercise his investigatory and disciplinary powers under the MLB Constitution, wrote Seeley, a former federal prosecutor. Interview subjects would be much less likely to voluntarily engage in candid conversations, and if those conversations or Department of Investigation's legal analysis of them were at risk of being disclosed. So basically saying, it's like, look, we can't do this because we won't be able to get snitches in the future, which, I mean, I use snitch very loosely. I mean, I think it's good that some of these guys came out and said these things. But the plaintiffs requested a swath of documents pertaining not only to the sign-stealing investigation, but MLB's business structure and its relationship with DraftKings where the games were hosted. Lawyers for the league suggested that the plaintiffs were overreaching in an in essence, gawking Clayton's effort to turn this court into a forum for disgruntled fans to air their grievances about MLB clubs breaking league rules has now turned into exploiting the discovery process to attempt to satisfy Clayton's curiosity about the contents of MLB's privileged and highly sensitive internal investigation files, lawyers for the MLB wrote. Seeley wrote in his letter that the interviews the league conducted were not recorded and that no transcripts were made, which is very sketchy in my opinion, but whatever. Instead, attorneys from MLB's Department of Investigation took notes of the interviews to varying degrees. As a general manner, those notes reflect the attorneys and investigators' judgments as to the facts that should be recorded in light of their impressions and understanding of the developing factual record, including based on ongoing guidance from fellow investigator Moira Weinberg and me about the pertinent issues to address, Seeley wrote. The notes also reflect our overall strategy for conducting each interview and the investigation more generally. So league attorneys then prepared summaries for each interview with the information they deemed would be pertinent to Commissioner Rob Manfred and any disciplinary actions. Access to interview notes, interview summaries, and investigation memoranda from the Astros and Red Sox investigations described above were and remain carefully controlled within MLB materials were marked as privileged and confidential, Seeley wrote. Apart from those individuals who conducted the investigations, only select senior MLB employees and external legal counsel have had access to the materials. They have not been shared with the interview subjects or other interview attendees from the MLBPA or the Astros and Red Sox organizations, respectively. They have not been shared with anyone associated with other MLB clubs. So, per Seeley, the possibility of the league would be sued informed the league's movements of planning of the investigation. The plaintiffs agree to file any response to the MLB's objections by Friday. Judge Jed Rakoff previously promised a decision on whether to dismiss the case by April 15th. Seeley reaffirmed Commissioner Manfred's recent comments to ESPN that the Red Sox investigation is in essence finished. All of the findings have not been released to the public, which is, once again, sketchy. But the Red Sox investigation work is substantially complete, but the investigation remains open because Commissioner Manfred has not yet finalized or publicly released his conclusions as a result of the ongoing public health crisis, Seeley wrote. So I understand, Rob, let me talk to Rob real quick. I understand that you have a huge... You got other issues going on right now. However, it seems like you got some issues going on. You got other issues going on as well. I understand coronavirus is probably a much bigger issue than outing another one of your teams into cheating. But I think it's very important for me, as a sports content person who needs content, that you go ahead and release those findings so we can go into it. I mean, that's I'm saying that jokingly, of course, but realistically, I think it's very important to release, go ahead and release that verdict because, I understand you're trying to figure out how baseball is going to work this season, but you have a lot more time for that. Let's go ahead and release these findings so we can figure out if we need to vilify the Red Sox as much as we need to vilify the Astros. Did two teams 2 years in a row cheat their way to winning a World Series? That's a very good question. And if that's true, then we need to investigate. I feel like we need to investigate every team in the league. I'm not joking. I feel like we need to weed out everyone who has been involved in any kind of cheating. We need to weed them out. It's absurd. If two teams, 2 years in a row, two separate teams, 2 years in a row, there's some connections to the two teams. Of course, Alex Cora, he was the bench coach for the Astros, went on to become the manager for the Red Sox, and won the World Series the very next year after the Astros cheated to win the World Series. So, did the Red Sox cheat to win the World Series just a year after another team cheated the World Series? I don't want to say I like the Nationals because I'm a Braves fan, but the Nationals, they had a very good team last year, but did they cheat? Did they cheat to win? That's a valid question. It really is. God forbid, did the Cubs cheat to win in 2016? You got to remember that Carlos Beltran said that the Astros were way behind everyone else when it came to sign stealing. What does that mean? Carlos Beltran, of course, was with the Yankees. The Yankees, of course, have not won a World Series, but have the Yankees been electronically stealing signs all this time? It's very interesting, and I know some people want the MLB to release all their notes about all this stuff, which I understand why, just for transparency's sake. But I understand their side of the argument where they kind of want to keep it confidential. So if they have to do this in the future, which I mean, I feel like they're going to investigate a lot more teams now because this is just unruly. But they want to keep it confidential. So, I mean, they can interview more players, so more players are more open to telling them what they want to hear or telling them what happened and telling them the truth and stuff like that. So I understand why the MLB wants to keep these notes out of court, wants to keep them confidential. And also the fact that they're not full transcripts, they're just notes from lawyers. So I don't know how effective these notes actually would be in court. These are issues that need to be discussed, of course. So, yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with the MLB on this one. Although I understand that people want to have transparency and learn everything about this as they can. But I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, it just needs to happen. If you want players to tell the truth, you got to promise them that that truth is not going to ruin them, you know? So there you have it. When we come back, we'll continue going down our list of top 100 sports movies when we return.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC, Invicta FC, Bellator, and One Championship. We got the fights covered. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts. Past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
All right, folks, and here we are, last segment of the show. And as I mentioned before, we're not going to do our random sport of the day here. We're instead going to count down this list of the Athletics top 100 sports movies, and by that I mean the Athletics staff. They all rated all of their favorite sports movies, and then they took the average rating from everybody, and that's how we came to this list. We did 100 to 90 yesterday. Today we're going to do 89 to 80, and I will mention if I have seen it before, if it interests me at all, and I will attempt to watch some of these. Probably will take a while because this, once again, is 100 sports movies. But hey, once again, got nothing else going for me right now. Yeah. And if I have seen it, I'll give in my own anecdotes or my own feelings about said movie. So let's get into it here. Number 89, and we're starting off with a doozy. It's one of my favorites. We're talking about Space Jam, folks. 1997, average rating of 73.55. It's a movie. It's got Michael Jordan. It's got Larry Bird. It's got Charles Barkley, Larry Johnson, Sean Bradley. Part of the plot is NBA players lose their abilities to a mysterious force, forcing the cancellation of this season, which is a little too on the nose at this moment in time here because the NBA season is, of course, not here. It's canceled. But this is a movie where Looney Tunes come in, play basketball against these aliens, and they have to recruit Michael Jordan to come help them, and Bill Murray's also there as well, and then Newman from Seinfeld is also there as well. I don't really know his actual name, I just know him as Newman, which is interesting to me, but this is a great movie. I've watched it since I was a kid. It's just a lot of great stuff in there, and it's kind of what puts Michael Jordan on that greatest of all time pedestal. And LeBron James is, of course, trying to copy it with Space Jam 2 coming out whenever that comes out, which I'm not going to lie, I don't think it's going to be nearly as good. But, you know, I'll hold that judgment until it comes out and I actually see it. Probably do a review on this podcast if it comes out this year. Number 88, Wildcats from 1986, average rating of 73.75. This is the second best sports movie, co-starring Woody Harrelson and Wesley Snipes. Classic sports movie setup. An unlikely coach makes unlikely winners out of misfit athletes as they beat some rich jerks. Is it a good movie? Probably not. Does it traffic in the same kind of troublesome tropes familiar in pretty much every 1980s movie? Yeah. But as a movie, you catch it on TBS, it works. The closing song is goofy and fantastic. It's the sport of kings. Better than Diamond Rings, football. Don't forget the Central High cheerleaders go-to chant, UGLY, you ain't got no alibi. You ugly, which is a chant for every single cheerleading squad in high school now. So, that makes sense. I've not seen this movie, unfortunately. So, moved on to 87. Blue Chips, 1994, average rating of 74.06. Pete Bell might be a good coach, but he's the worst recruiter in America and deserved to be fired. In the beginning of the movie, he tries to pin Western University's lack of talent on his staff. But how about that? Bell needed Robert Wool's pseudo-Nike huckster character to tell him to recruit Butch McRae, which is Penny Hardaway, despite the fact that Butch plays for the same Chicago high school as Bell's best player, Tony, and Bell was best friends with his principal, Lou Gossett Jr., playing a Catholic priest. So that makes me not want to watch it because of the incompetency. But anyways, more subtle inconsistency that there is when underground street agent Slick tells Bell about a player no one has ever heard of in Neon Baudet, a.k.a. Shaquille O'Neal. Slick then reveals Neon briefly played in junior college and just destroyed a bunch of NBA players in an open gym. And, he looks like Shaq, but no one's ever heard of him, which is crazy. One detail is that sports writer Ed O'Neill blows his own scoop in the denouement press conference. All this said, I love Blue Chips. It's a good movie. Pretty good movie. Next up, Tin Cup. This is one of my mom's favorite movies. If there's a sports movie with Kevin Costner in it, it is my mom's favorite. By the way, I've noticed. Tin Cup, 1996, average rating 74.39. Humans are fallible. Most aren't down with the flaws. Publicly exposed. Kevin Costner's weathered underdog golf pro character Roy McAvoy constantly loses battle with pride and water on the 72nd hole of the U.S. Open, on and off the course. The go-for-it charm while chasing greatness makes old Roy a folk hero. When a defining moment comes along, you define the moment, or the moment defines you. This is one of those good golf movies. It's a pretty good golf movie. It's not, obviously, like I said, Kevin Costner's in a lot of sports movies. This is not anywhere near the upper echelon of Kevin Costner sports movies. So, yeah. Number 85, We Are Marshall, 2006, average rating 74.46. We Are Marshall, the writer who wrote the excerpt for this, said he watched it in a theater with members of his high school team. Vague ideas of the details of the actual story, but I'm man enough to admit that I got very emotional in that theater. Matthew McConaughey delivers a stirring and inspiring performance as Jack Langille, and the sensitivity and respect in the way director McG approached the material deserves to be recognized. A film like this can easily feel like capitalizing off emotional response, but I felt like that it honored the real victims of the tragedy wonderfully. I also remember feeling very thankful for my teammates as we left the theater that day. We Are Marshall is a fantastic movie. If you've never seen We Are Marshall, it is a great movie, not just a sports movie, but it is a great, just emotional movie about a real-life tragedy that happened in the 1970s. I'm, of course, talking about the plane crash that killed the entire Marshall football team except for like 5 players. That's a very good movie. Highly recommend it. It gets very emotional, of course, but it's a very interesting movie. It's very intriguing to watch. Number 84, Cool Runnings, 1993, average rating of 74.49. Feel the rhythm, feel the rhyme. Cool Runnings may be corny, not entirely historically accurate, but it is a feel-good movie. Add some of the catchy lines, splash of John Candy, which John Candy is one of the best actors of all time, in my opinion, or best comedic actors, I guess, and it's exactly what you'd want from any sports comedy. Cool Runnings is a great movie. I have seen that as well. Cool Runnings, this guy's right. It's not historically accurate at all, but it is funny, it is corny, and, I mean, Jamaica has a bobsled team, and it's a good movie. It's a great movie to watch. Number 83, River Runs Through It, 1992. Average rating 74.54. 20-something Brad Pitt's charisma carries the film, but Norman McLean's words are its engine. Robert Redford narrates directly from the essential Montana novella as a sweeping drama tells the story of brotherhood, faith, class, and race through a lens shadow cast over the big Blackfoot. In this classic, I've never heard of this movie, actually. Gonna be honest with you. Looks like it's a fishing movie of some kind. Yeah, I mean, it's got young Brad Pitt in it, so I guess something there for everybody. Next up, 82 Glory Road, 2006, average rating of 74.61. This movie introduced the world to what El Paso already knew, that Don Haskins was a legend. Sure, it's a feel-good sports tale, but it captured the challenges of race, culture, and college sports to tell the story that could have only originated in this unique border city. So, I'm going to do a quick Google search because that does sound familiar to me. I'm not sure if I remember it correctly. Yes. Okay, so this is the movie about Texas Western. New coach builds the team. He has the very first, I think, all black lineup in NCAA history in 1966. I have seen this movie. I vaguely remember it, though. I haven't seen it in a while, but I remember it being a pretty good, feel-good movie. So, yeah. Number 81, The Rookie, 2002, average rating 74.74. The excerpt reads, one of my high school teammates frequently parroted a line from this movie. You know what we get to do today, Brooks? We get to play baseball. That's the crux of The Rookie, love for a beautiful game. The film touches on themes of resilience, family, and hope, and the story of a high school teacher turned big leaguer feels even more remarkable because it's based on true events. I remember watching this movie. I always got this movie confused with one of my personal favorite movies, which is Rookie of the Year. I always got these confused, but Dennis Quaid is very good in this movie. It's a very good movie. It's one of my mom's favorite. It doesn't have Kevin Costner in it, though, but it's one of my mom's favorite. Then number 80, last one we're going to talk about today, Love and Basketball 2000, average rating 74.79. It's part family drama, part love story, and partially an allegory on the destructive side of competition. Both Omar Epps and Santa Lathan are excellent, playing lifelong friends whose devotion to hoops clouds and stirs emotional judgment. It's a cleverly written movie, very few cliches, and basically is because of that, easily floats above the restriction of any one genre. There's a reason why it's cited so often by hoops lovers, and 2 decades after its release still holds up really well. I think I've seen this movie before, but I don't fully remember it. But there you go. That's 89 to 80. Sunday we'll do 79 to 70. And that's it for today's podcast. Thank you for listening, everybody. If you want to like, rate, subscribe to the podcast, do that on wherever you get your podcast. Then, of course, you can follow me on Twitter at Strickland_Josh. I'll see y'all on Sunday. Have a good weekend.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.